So, when's the last time you were in London, Jon?
That's the most difficult question. When was the last time I was here?
Was it 2007?
Really? Was it been that long?
Wow, London Jazz Festival? When was that?
Oh.
That was then, was it? Was that the last show you would have done here?
I think so.
When you're in London, do you meet up with people that have you got do you stay in hotels or do you stay around at friends' houses? How do you play that?
Brian usually opens his flat to me, but we have been out of touch. We have periods of eclipse, and we're in one for the last year or so, and so I'm in a hotel now.
And is that probably
permanent? I don't think so.
No,
I don't think so. No. There are lingering such things. I'm getting old enough so that I'm thinking about situations like My Life in the Bush of Ghosts, and where we were in New York at that time. And I made this timeline. I'd always kept this agenda with when I was in New York and about things that happened, girlfriends, events, and stuff that was going on. And at that time, he and David Byrne and I were hanging out quite a bit, and I was introducing him to Walter Di Maria, the Earth artist, so there was quite a bit of exchange going on at that time, and what I was doing was this attempt to merge other kinds of music, non-Western music, and all that, and trying to create something which was where it wasn't just a layer cake, where you had, where the texture you couldn't exactly extract. Here's the African layer, here's the, the electronic, here's the jazz layer, that kind of thing. And so, and I had already had 2 records at the time I met them. That one, Earthquake Island, that we were playing when we came in, and Vernal Equinox, and so. And I was older, it was that was kind of, I hadn't actually comprehended all of these things until I went back and started looking through my diary. And I was 43, Brian was 34, David was 27, something like that. So, and they were very, very on top of they were just young enough to be swept up by the Talking Heads phenomenon, and they were number one playing Radio City Music Hall and all that kind of thing. And I was basically what you would describe as a downtown artist, right? and on unemployment, by the way, and so that collision of things was, and of course, I welcome the idea of like not being dependent on grants the rest of my life, and thinking, well, I'd never been very ivory tower about things, right? I didn't come from a completely classical background, nor did I wish to be Philip Glass, so I was perfectly happy to have that association. But they got a lot from me, and that showed up in my life with the Bush of Ghosts, and I didn't really receive any credit for that as a kind of, I think it was a strategic move on the part of the companies. I was supposed to be doing that. They asked me to do it. I had in my agenda, I actually discovered that about just 10 days after finishing Possible Musics with Brian in the studio. David would come by the studio and ask if there's anything he could do, and all that. And we had talked, and they had said, hey, we have this idea to do a record together, right? The three of us. In fact, David had said. He had come back after a show in New Jersey. He looked out over the audience and said, like, what am I doing here? And he was dissatisfied with what was going on. So, in fact, they absorbed where I was and the things I was doing, and asked me to join with them. The premise was, hey, well, let's go out to California and get a house in the desert or something like that and get some primitive recording equipment and make a sort of interesting quasi-ethnic record, sort of like the Eskimos. Do you remember the Eskimos? They had a record called... The Residents, right? Had a record called Eskimo, which was a kind of fake tribal situation, fake tribal record. So
where was Brian Eno at this point, by the way? Because
we were there.
Where was he at in his career? What had he just been working on?
Well, he was simultaneously producing Remain in Light, which I have a track on, right, an overdub on, and that was why I guess that's why he came to New York, was to do that, and
it's post-Roxy music.
Yeah, for sure. Days after finishing Possible Musics, they had already moved on to the next project. They went out to L.A. and started to work on what became My Life in the Bush of Ghosts. So I got a cassette in the mail. We're talking about days in which it was not email and it was not files coming to you, and it sounded like there was some sort of it was I think Kulthum with some sort of quasi-African thing, that a beat from the Talking Heads, which I thought was kind of silly, and I said, well, look, this is not really what I'm interested. This is not me, right? This is not what I'm really interested in. So I think they they were in a sense there was a big sigh of relief amongst the if you can consider their whole business orbit, right? The Seymour Stein of what was the record label? Sire, right?
Yeah.
The Talking Heads label, and Brian with EG and all that, all those connections were. I think they were a bit too eager to accept my rejection of that. Instead of, if I had been a Ravi Shankar or a Ry Cooder at that time, the logical thing to happen would have been to say, "Come on out." I'm sorry you didn't like that. Why don't you? We'll fly you out for a couple of days, and we'll do a couple of days in the studio and see what happens. Work it out. But I actually never heard anything from them after that. So they took that as being, I think the business interest took over, and the business circle said, "Oh, forget, this guy doesn't have any power. He's not going to come after you legally. He's on unemployment, right? He doesn't have the power to challenge anything. So just go ahead and do it, right?" So, and I was a bit, not only a bit, to me it was like toxic. The situation was toxic because it was like seeing my child, my DNA being taken up and put into another frame, and my not being there. So I actually wrote to both of them and trying to analyze the entire situation, both from my failings as being not aggressive enough, in a way, not demanding enough, and sticking my head in the sand, continued to have fun together. We continued to go out for dinners, and had the same circle of friends and all that kind of thing. And Brian went on to produce 2 more records, right, with EG. And so I was trying to analyze all this from.
So at the time, you felt that your DNA, i.e., your concept, your vision of music, you felt that had been slightly kidnapped, taken over by
co-opted, yes,
those guys, but more the business around them, or them as individuals?
Oh, well, I think they were, as I said, if you look at David's age, right, a 28-year-old guy who was like, riding the crest, but smart enough and, art schoolish enough to be looking elsewhere than where the Talking Heads were at that point. Then it was a kind of, a kind of natural choice, or an understandable choice to want to go someplace else, right? And the fact is, they did that record, and then there was nothing to follow it up. It wasn't as though that suddenly became their career. It was something that was done, and then they realized that they couldn't continue to do that. It wouldn't make sense, right? So it's a kind of a, as I said, I'm old enough now to have to want to clear the air on it, and to let the story be known, and there shouldn't be any resistance on their part to this, because it's just what happened. And I think that they probably, in their best selves, would say that they would probably agree that they were under control of like a young testosterone, and were eager for whatever, the best fruits they could pick off the tree, right? and I got left out of that, and I haven't exactly been wealthy the rest of my life. It's been fairly hard, even with Brian's help in doing the next few records as a producer.
And you may find yourself living in a shotgun shack, and you may find yourself in another part of the world, and you may find yourself behind the wheel of a large automobile, and you may find yourself in a beautiful house with a beautiful wife, and you may ask yourself, well, how did I get here? Letting the days go by, let the water hold me down. Letting the days go by, water flowing underground into the blue again. After the money's gone, once in a lifetime, water flowing underground. And you may ask yourself, how do I work this? And you may ask yourself, where is that large automobile? And you may tell yourself, this is not my beautiful house. And you may tell yourself, this is not my beautiful wife. Letting the days go by, let the water hold me down. Letting the days go by, water flowing underground into the blue again. After the money's gone, once in a lifetime, water flowing underground.
So anyway, I'm here at this point, trying to clear the air.
Good, it's good to hear it. This record, the Talking Heads album, with Once in a Lifetime, which you were involved with quite heavily with the arrangements, was that pre? Where would that have fitted?
It was kind of simultaneous. I think I did the overdub after. I don't remember. It was all sort of all clustered together. Even though I have the day by day agenda and some in my notes here, but it was all happening. Both the work on Possible Musics and what became Possible Musics, and the Talking Heads, and the plan, the idea that was forming in the head about doing this record together, right? So, I still have a tape of my playing. There was something they had given me from Samira Tofik, the Lebanese pop singer. That I think I finally realized it wound up on as track 9. I think because I haven't listened to it. I haven't listened to My Life in the Bush or Ghost. I just, if I hear it in a restaurant or around, and something like that, I just didn't want to hear it.
Stockhausen and that early meeting for you. How did that come about? And coming to Germany, how old were you then?
I was probably late 30s or middle 30s, and I'd gotten a grant from the German government to go and study electronic music. I'd been I taught after I left. I got a master's degree from Eastman School, Conservatory, Eastman School, University of Rochester, and then I went to, and so I got those 2 years in Germany with Stockhausen, and I was married. My wife was a pianist, Margaret Krimsky, and she.
You met her there?
No, we had met before in school, actually. Yeah, I was. How about married the first girl I had sex with? There, how about that for a revolution? I mean a revelation. I mean, that sounds today that sounds like totally, what this guy. Forget about anything he says after this, because if there's a guy that's so retarded that this is what happened, but it was, and
you still together?
No. Unfortunately, no happy ending to that one.
Right. Well.
But no, after that was like if you want to continue on the erotic trail. That was when I met this beautiful African American, Native American mixture girl, which that was like divorce time, right? I mean, it was all so powerful. And at that time, I was listening to Miles and On the Corner, and I started playing with a wah-wah pedal, and everything was just kind of. I thought, okay, that's where the idea of like. Okay, I don't want to spend the rest of my life in a conservatory as a teacher. I don't want to be a university guy, in a tweed jacket walking around the campus with my pipe. And I thought, okay, this has got. I see where Miles. I was looking at the kind of like vitality, that was coming out of the black world, and what kind of how that played, how that role of like. North and South, and below the belt, above the belt, and the idea of fourth world maps onto that too. That was such a revelation to realize that there was something like black classical music, which was what Miles used to call it. He tried to redefine that idea instead of it, being separation of like here's jazz over here, here's classical music over here. As long as you were like doing music that all took place with like even eighth notes, that was classical. But anything that had like a curve in it, or anything that was below the waist and sexy and like was on the other side of the tracks, right, so to speak. And at least from my naive boy born in Memphis, Tennessee, a kind of mentality at that time. So that was a big revelation, and that was kind of mirrored in the marriage and the breakup of the marriage, and my sort of like wanting to go this other place. I wanted to go this other. It was like, we were going dancing all the time, and dance became a big thing, right? I started dancing a lot with her, getting the body thing loosened up. And that's essential to the musical. You can't really. I just recently, as a funny thing, I said, I always thought about challenging Philip Glass or Steve Reich to a dance-off. see if they could actually move, Yeah.
back to your timeline of the time and your second wife, Fourth World.
No, we didn't get married. We just lived together.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you?
That was Malibu time, by the way.
Was it?
New York versus Malibu. I moved to California after that. So the whole sensuality explosion was, geographic also.
On a creative musical discovery for you, to push it like you did, to be this pioneer, did you travel around the world and go and find this music, or you?
Yeah, the Terry Riley NC and the meeting with Lamont Young and that period. Well, they were Lamont brought Pandit Pranath, the great Indian vocalist, over from India, and I studied. That's when the real change happened for me. Like I stopped playing and started singing. I was singing, trying to follow his the curves, right? I mean, that was like such an amazing. I went to India with Pranath and with Terry Riley and Lamont and with my new girlfriend, with the African American, Native American girl, the Fourth World girl, and I remember seeing taxi drivers who were like stopping work to listen to Bismillah Khan, like their ability to like perceive curves in the air, right? Terry Riley had what's called, or his record had something about curves in the air, didn't he? And which is a kind of listening, a way of listening that I think is completely is getting lost and it requires some kind of imagination that goes beyond iTunes, and 3 minutes and all that sort of stuff. In other words, I'm jumping ahead too far because it relates to this book that I've been working on called The North and South of You, and
tell us about that. Actually, sorry,
yeah.
Can we jump?
Sure, yeah. Let's jump. I realized in New York that it was good to have a logo. That's where I came up with the idea of Fourth World, and because that was catnip to journalists, to be able to say, "Oh, what's Fourth World?" and then to be able to say immediately, well, it's like Third World tradition and First World technology. So 3 + 1 = 4, right? So that has kind of morphed into over the years, and I mean, I could keep pounding away at that forever, but it evolved into this idea of North and South, which came from, where did that start? There's a Cole Porter song, East, West, North, and the South of You, right? So that idea of like I started thinking more, reading more. I'd like every idea I would get that was like succinct enough to put on a 3x5 index card, I would do. And so I have this giant collection of index cards and started to get very, do a lot of reading about people who had good ideas about the world and what makes it tick. So I started looking at this picture of the global situation, the North-South situation there, where you have the North calling the South underdeveloped, even though it's the Zamba. The Zamba is there. It's not exactly underdeveloped in that sense, right? So it's the kind of prejudice that comes along with the North view of the South is something that maps onto our own bodies. So at the waistline is the equator, and above that you have the command central, which is the brain, and intellect and abstraction and all that kind of thing. And below the waist you have the oft neglected, right, by intellectuals and white people in general, let's say, the oft neglected south of the body, and so there's a mapping of the kind of disrespect eventually, but I mean, it just becomes mostly from ignorance. They've never done that. They didn't have that, or they, being white people, other white people, like, didn't have this experience that I had, gradually with the changeover of my life that from New York to Malibu, and all that. So it's really been about how does a stiff, can't dance white boy from Memphis, Tennessee gradually melt himself into the rest of the world, in which the sensual, the South is more of the South going on, and so I started thinking about a balance. The brain takes over. We're lost in language. We're lost in, and language is not reality. Language is a coded description of reality. But we take it for reality, and we're able to talk ourselves out of the fact that we might be sitting in a chair that's uncomfortable or our shoes are too tight, because the Western brain does that kind of thing. So it's a forgetting of the fact that we're animals. Okay, that's another place it goes.
Can we quickly go to Earthquake Island, the record?
Sure.
Do you mind? And
Sure.
just sort of putting me in the place, because this was your second record officially, right?
That's right.
As an artist. And I mean, I've just been listening to it, and I think it's totally survived the time. It sounds amazing, actually.
Sure, after that 2-hour introduction, why not?
Tell us a little bit about the moment around that record.
Yeah.
Put us into that picture.
Well, let's see. I'd done this. The first record was a Vernal Equinox, which was quite an art-based thing. friend of mine, David Rosenboom, became the head of this electronic music studio in York University in Canada, in Toronto, I think. So that was done sort of piece by piece. And then later, when I came to New York, I knew Don Cherry because of a connection. He lived in the same building as one of the Talking Heads in Brooklyn. And Don turned to me on. He said, "Hey, this is like amazing percussionist in town now." So then, this was in Soho, back before Soho was so glittery, and then so he's and so that was Nana, and so I had Nana come in and do some overdubs on that material that I had done at York University. It was a small label. The managers of John Cage and this company called Art Services. I was actually living in the same building as they were, and also Gil Evans was living in that building. West Bet's down on the river for this building for artists.
Did you meet Gil Evans? Did you know him?
Oh yeah, we did. I did. I know. I just adore Gil Evans. I mean, that's you've touched on a gusher for me there. I just thrilled to.
What should we play?
His arrangement.
What should I listen to right now?
Let's see, to Gil. Gosh, everything. All the Porgy stuff. Any of the Porgy, any of that.
As an arranger.
As an arranger, which goes way, way beyond the word arranger, like him and also Johnny Mandel. Johnny Mandel, the arrangements that he does for like Shirley Horn, that kind of thing, are their compositions. They're just, and if you listen to the introductions and the outros and all that other stuff, they're little compositions, and the songs are just there. I'm always listening to those.